Today, the House is under Republican control. In the Senate, the Democrats have more seats than the Republicans, but they don't have 60 and therefore can't break a Republican filibuster. So it can't be said that they actually control all the legislation in the Senate. But, of course, all of this could change after next November's election.
And there are a lot of questions here. Are the Tea Party freshmen safe? Is the electorate fed up with threats over the last few months to shut down the government? Who will be the potential winners and losers in Congress? And how will the shift in Congress affect America's boomers and seniors? We're joined by two prestigious pollsters and message masters.
Frank Luntz works for Republican candidates and Mark Mellman works for Democrats. Boomers and seniors vote in large numbers, with entitlements as one of the major issues of the 2012 election. They could become a decisive factor in many of the congressional races. It is that question that we want to focus on with our two guests. Thanks to both of you for coming. Well, Mark, what do you think? Will voters now sweep out the Republicans as they swept out the Democrats last time?
Well, I don't think we're going to see a sweeping kind of change in this election. It's a little bit more confusing. You know, the last time things were bad in the country, Democrats were clearly in charge, and voters reacted against those who were in charge.
For a second. Problem in the control room, I believe.
Well, I thought we were brilliant. I see no problem out here.
And, you know, the insights were unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. Pearls.
They're discussing what we're going to
By the way, be careful. I may come to you first this time.
That ain't gonna happen. There's a certain pattern. That's why I always win at Vegas. I know when it's going black and when it's going red.
You do? What about green?
Only when Steve Wynn is around.
He's a great guy, isn't he?
He's
I think. I don't know him well, but I've met him, talked to him, interviewed him.
a little bit too emotional these days. Just a little.
Because of our problem
Steve
before, we
Wynn.
have to start from the top of that, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. Because you want to come out on camera, too, at one point, don't you? Never mind. Do whatever you want to. Whatever you want to do.
Don't you miss
They're discussing it in there.
the old days when there was just one camera?
I miss the old days when there were only 3 networks, no cable networks, no internet. You had to watch.
I miss those days, too.
Okay, I'm ready.
Right.
And then I'll come back on 2 also, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought you wanted to do.
5 seconds. 4, 3, come out of tape.
Today, the House is under Republican control. While in the Senate, the Democrats have more seats than the Republicans, they don't have 60, can't break a Republican filibuster, so they don't actually control things. But all of that could change after next November's election.
Are the Tea Party freshmen safe? Is the electorate fed up with repeated threats to shut down the government? Who will be the potential winners and losers in Congress? And how will the shift in Congress affect America's boomers and seniors? We'll ask all those questions to two prestigious pollsters and message masters.
Frank Luntz works for Republican candidates, and Mark Mellman works for Democrats. Boomers and seniors vote in large numbers. With entitlements as one of the major issues of the 2012 election, they could become a decisive factor in many of the congressional races. It is that question we want to focus on with our two guests. Both of you, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Well, Frank, are they going to sweep the Republicans out this time as they swept the Democrats out the time before?
And as they swept the Republicans the time before that, it just goes back and forth. There is an anti-incumbent mood, and I do believe it's real. In fact, more than 50% of Americans would actually vote out every incumbent, including their own member of Congress. And the level of re-elect is lower for senators and congressmen today than they have ever measured it. So there's clearly a desire for change. However, as you get closer to an election, usually things start to come back towards the center. And unless the Democrats have a plan of their own that is clearly articulated, it probably will end up being a wash.
But you know, you heard in the package there the structural question, the fact that so many of these members of Congress can't really be defeated in a general election. They're safe as rain, and but it's in the primaries that they are worried. They're worried from the left as Democrats, from the right as Republicans. How does that play out in this November election?
Well, that's right. Even though people, as Frank said, are fed up with Congress, would vote out the incumbents, the reality is they're not going to,
Right.
and incumbents know that in most cases. It is the primaries where the people tend to get worried about, especially those long-term incumbents. And the real activism right now is in the Tea Party, on the right side of the spectrum, the pretty far right side of the spectrum. And there's a lot of Republicans formerly moderate Republicans, only a few left, frankly, but a few of those moderate Republicans have looked around and said, wait a second, I'm worried about that Tea Party threat. I've seen other people suffer from that. And so you've seen people who have been moderate Republicans in the past moving very far to the right very quickly to avoid those Tea Party challenges. What does that do? The impact of that is to make it harder and harder to compromise. Frankly, fewer and fewer conservative Democrats, no liberal Republicans, very few moderate Republicans, and that makes compromise all the more difficult. Add to that the additional structural barrier. Our founders set up a system, and the rulemakers in the Senate enhanced it to say, we don't want to get things done. We want to stop things from happening, and they've done a good job at that.
Well, Frank, over to you and the Tea Party. Are they a plus or a minus?
Well, they were a plus in 2010, clearly, because they were activated and energized. And there are a lot of Tea Party members that were in the over 50. You'd see a lot of AARP cards in that group, even though supposedly they were accused of wanting to make changes to Medicare and Social Security. In 2012, look, Congress's approval rating is actually lower than Muammar Gaddafi's in Libya about a week or 10 days ago. The challenge for the Democrats is that if they only talk about the Tea Party, then it creates an anger and frustration towards a specific group rather than individuals. In the end, the American people, more so now than ever before, they are paying attention. They're watching the debates. They're reading their news clips. They're going on the web for information. They're actually more informed today than they were in 2010 or 2008 or before that. The challenge for both political parties is not just to say what's wrong with the other side. They're going to have to put forward platforms and positions where they stand.
When you say more informed than ever before, how does that play out? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for your political party?
Well, the more information people have, the more likely they are to vote for Democrats. That's my view, and I'll bet Frank's view is the opposite.
Really?
So the question is not how much information they have, it's what kind of information do they have. They have the right information or the wrong information. But look, the reality is there is a lot of information out there. The problem that people have today is you can get information that only backs up your point of view. You can go and live your entire life only hearing people that agree with you, only hearing facts that back up your point of view. That, again, hardens people into those positions, makes it all the more difficult to get compromised, not just in the Congress, but in the country as a whole.
And we shouldn't be doing this. The truth is we should not be feeding into it. And if we were to step back and take off our partisan labels and really have a conversation over a beer, we'd say that what's happening to the system is pretty awful and that you can't actually get something done when you need to. I'm hoping that there are people who can step back and prioritize the country over their own political gain.
Well, how do we do that?
I'm not confident.
I don't even need a beer to say things are pretty bad.
How do we do that? I mean, when I first came to Washington over 50 years ago, compromise is what both parties did, and they passed legislation. I remember in the '65 Medicare, the Republicans fought hard against some of the principles, but when they lost, it passed the Senate 87-13.
1865?
And half the Republicans, almost half of them, voted for it. Today, look what happened to the Obama plan. Not a single Republican vote in either house. Was that good for the country, Frank?
No, the problem is that you're punished. You're actually punished on either side if you compromise. On the left, they're going after Barack Obama. On the right, they're going after John Boehner. And so you can't get anything done. And I understand why seniors look at this and say, you know what? Our democracy, for all its flaws, worked better in the past than it does today. I'm actually frightened about the way it's going to work 10 years from now.
And so are they, and for their children and grandchildren. So what do we do?
Well, look, we had Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, say his most important goal over these 2 years was to defeat Barack Obama. When your most important goal as a Republican leader in the Senate is a political outcome, a defeat of an incumbent president, that says right away we're not going to get much done in the Congress.
Nancy Pelosi.
And that is the problem we've got. Everybody is so concerned about the political outcomes. People are not concerned about doing what's right for the country.
But it looked like the House might force us into default instead of raising the debt limit. Mitch McConnell came forward with a program to try to actually bridge
together with Harry Reid.
The veteran legislators that are so despised by the general public seem to be the ones that actually don't want to have the country go down the drain.
Well, that's right. And I think that, look, the reality is Reid and McConnell did work together to try and save that. The Republican caucus in the House, though, said, you know what? We think it's not so bad if the country defaults. And that led to the downgrade of credit of the country.
But what he just did once again, if you're going to play that kind of politics, even on a show like this, then imagine what's going to happen in Iowa, New Hampshire. Imagine what's going to happen in Florida and Ohio. There are some people, and I'm one of them, that wants no part of it, that actually stepped out of electoral politics because I don't want to be the one who creates the negative ads. He's brilliant. Mark Mellman is brilliant. at finding that divisive nature that separates 51% from 49. But we can't keep
Have you
doing
told
that
this to
anymore.
Michelle Bachmann? Have you told this to some of the other Republicans?
The truth will set folks free here.
Yes, but but as you say, the truth for your perspective is different than other people's perspective. We don't even share the same facts anymore. We don't share the same assumptions. And we are tearing this country apart. And at some point, someone's going to stand up and say, enough is enough. Mike Bloomberg will get out there. Or I don't know, just not Donald Trump. Please, not Donald Trump.
But it does get to that question of the fed-upness of people with the government and people talking about neither party. They want something else. Mark?
People say that all the time, but in reality, it just never works out quite that way. We've been through these periods before. We've seen people like John Anderson and
Ross
Perot, Frank worked for, and people saying, boy, that's the change we need. That's the third party, totally different approach. And the reality is when push comes to shove, they don't get significant numbers of votes, at least not enough votes to really make a difference in the country. And unfortunately, that's the reality. The reality is we are a two-party country, and we're going to remain a two-party country for some time to come.
Well, thank you very much, Mark Mellman, Frank Luntz. Thanks for being with us. And coming up next, the doctor is in, a physician turned senator who voted against health care reform, on whether this is a do-nothing Congress and what it means for boomers and seniors.
And Charles Rangel, a veteran congressman from New York who's taken his shots and survived. Back in a few minutes.